was thinking well, that could be for us, but people can hear that too. But no, it was just this conversation between us is more about our personal reactions to what happened, and less about our logical thoughts, because I think that's going to give a different type of impact to people when they hear our personal reactions, especially because we are a part of the community. People know us, and so hearing how this affected us personally, hopefully will move people to be more empathetic if they aren't already extremely empathetic, and then hopefully inspire people to take some action, And so I know that everybody doesn't necessarily know all of us. So what we'll do is we'll just go around. You can just introduce your name, what you do at the school, or where you are at the school, and any other piece of identifying information that you want to add. And Joe, in my screen, you're right here, so I have you start.
Obviously. Well, my name is Joanna Shamenda. I will be a junior at Robert Hussein College and a nursing major. I'm sorry, what else did you want to say?
Anything else you want to say? Any identifying information yourself,
Oh, okay. I am the vice president of SMAC. I'm an RA. Let's see. I work at Student Life, so you'll most likely see me a lot. Yeah, that's about it.
Good, appreciate that. And then, Sonnette, you can go ahead and go.
Okay, my name is Sonnette Bascoe. I am an assistant professor in the psychology department. This is my second year with the college. I am married. My husband is an attorney here in Rochester, and we have 4 children that span the ages from 15 to 5. Oh, 6. They just turned 6 yesterday.
Hey, congratulations. Happy birthday.
Thank you.
And Doug, you can go ahead.
My name is Doug Cullum. I serve as Vice President Dean at Northeastern Seminary on the campus of Roberts Weston College. It's a privilege to be here today. Thank you.
Appreciate you. And I'm Herb Alexander. I'm the Director of Diversity and Equity here, Assistant Men's Basketball Coach. And as of, I think, July 1, I'll also be the Associate Dean of Students coming up. So
congratulations.
Appreciate that. Hey, appreciate that. Come on, y'all too much. All right. But yeah, so I just want to start off and just talk about our general reaction. I think I appreciate the clap up there. We'll take that.
Doug is good. I have to figure out how to do all these things.
It took me a while to get that down. I had to go through upgrades and updates and all types of things. But yeah, so my first question to you all, and I wrote it down because I wanted it to be exact. I think it's very important. But so what was your initial reaction when you saw the video, and if you didn't see it because it was too hard to watch, or if you heard about the killing of George Floyd, and then why do you think you had this reaction, when you saw the video or heard about it? And Sonnette, we can start with you. That'd be perfect.
Yeah. So I couldn't watch it right away. My husband told me about it and how he described it. I knew that it was going to be very difficult to watch, but I didn't want to turn a blind eye to it. I wanted to watch it, but it took several days for me to force myself to do so. And it was heartbreaking, to say the least. It was very difficult to see him beg for his life, to see him unarmed, already in handcuffs on the ground, and to see him suffocated like that in broad daylight on a busy street with eyewitnesses and cell phones out recording it. And even at one point, after saying that he couldn't breathe so many times, he said, "I'm going to die right here," and kind of knowing that that's your last moment, and seeing that was extremely difficult. I couldn't sleep for that night. I woke up around 2 a.m. and I just allowed the emotions to come out again and just allowed myself to cry. I remember praying, for his family and for God to comfort them as only He can, experiencing something like that. I remember just the memories coming up of my husband and I having to have conversation with our son, who was only in elementary school at that time. Just the conversation that I think almost every Black family has to have with their children, especially their boys, in terms of how to conduct themselves if they're ever stopped or questioned by the police. He's extremely intelligent, and I can just see him, if he knows that he didn't do anything wrong, trying to tell the officers that, and just having to explain to him that you can't do that. And we live in a predominantly white area. He goes to predominantly white school, and that you can't do what you may see your white friends doing because of how you may be perceived by some officers, in terms of if there's any signs that you're resisting, that you're being combative, or even questioning them, that you can't do that. And just having to have that hard conversation with him and seeing him cry, hearing that hard truth, it brought up all of those memories. And my daughter, who is now, she just turned 11, but at the time she was 10, knowing that my husband and I would have to have a conversation with her about what happened, because we know that we can't shelter her from it or them from it. And for me and my husband, it's really important that our children understands to try to keep themselves safe, but also so that they can speak intelligently about this in school when these conversations are brought up, that they know the facts, that they're able to speak intelligently about it. When, insensitive and like ignorant comments are made about what happened, or, assumptions that are made about what happened. Because I've been in that position, my oldest son has been in that position where they hear, insensitive or ignorant comments, and it's hard sometimes to speak up, to say something, or not knowing what to say. And so just trying to prepare them for that, and so that they can speak intelligently about it, and maybe shed light, on the situation. But really, if I had any advice like to give educators, is that the onus shouldn't be on the Black and brown children to do that. The onus really should be on the educator to know the facts, and to have a well-rounded discussion, a balanced, view on it when discussing these sorts of things, with their students and in the classroom. So it's like all of this is just going through my mind that night as I'm just, dreading, conversations with my children, continue conversations that we have to have with them. You just want them to be able to just stay young and enjoy their childhood as much as possible. And just knowing that they have to grow up sooner than we would like them to. And just being reminded like what it means to be a Black parent in America, and grieving that loss for our children in terms of just being kids and not having to kind of deal with these things that they have to deal with.
Yeah, and I have a follow-up question to that. Do you feel in a sense that being that you're a Black mother to Black children, that there's almost a sense of pre-grieving before something already even happens, just because the thought of something could happen,
Yeah, definitely. We pray and we cover our children on a regular basis. But also just knowing, and, embarking on parenthood, being a mother, being a father, like you said, we already know that we are going to have these conversations with our children once we believe that they are of age to understand, and trying to break it down at their level. But for us, we don't have the privilege of not having those conversations when we believe it's a matter of like life and death, that these conversations can potentially save their life. So it is, it's difficult.
It's heavy. Yeah, I know. Well, thank you. I appreciate you sharing that so authentically. And Joe, I want to go back and ask you the same thing about how did you, personally feel when you watched the video? Because you watched the video, or were you able to?
Yeah, my mom actually sent it in our family group in the chat or whatever. But just to piggyback, that was an amazing response in that. For me, it was hard just because we just kind of got off of Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor. So hearing that, actually, my dad was the one who told me. I don't know where I was, but he caught me. He said, "Joanna, did you see the George Floyd video?" I said, "No." And he described it to me. And I was like, "Oh man, like that's, so sad. Like Ahmaud Arbery just happened." And him telling it to me, it didn't really register as deep as much as when I saw it. Like when it was heavy. You know what I mean? Like I remember watching the video, really couldn't even make it through, and hearing him plead for his mother's life. You know what I mean? Who's not even there, not even alive, and saying I can't breathe. And then you also see, you have that, hearing him like cry out and hearing him like beg for his life. And then you look at the officer and just like the sheer apathetic look he had in his face, even to the point where he did this in broad daylight and looked at the cameras. You know what I mean? Like he knew what he was doing. And to me, that made me angry. You know what I mean? Like I was angry, I was sad, I cried as well. It was something that I've been thinking about a lot. You know what I mean? And I've struggled with it a lot. It was hard for me to process. It was hard for me to like even have conversations. Like people would reach out to me and it was hard to talk to them because it was such a heavy thing to kind of witness and see. And then just the people around him, like you see the lady to the side with the camera, she's the first responder, and she was saying to him like, "Hey, I want to check his pulse, like check his pulse for me." And then other people pleading on the side, like, he can't breathe, like maybe we should get, you started to see everything happen, and this man, this officer, still really didn't care, didn't have any remorse, or he like really any care for his life. And that was hard for me to watch, but I did, and it was something that I've processed by really talking to my family, talking to leaders. I mean, we just had our first leadership meeting for SMAC for this upcoming year, and that was one of the first things that we talked about right from the jump, was how we felt. Yeah.
Hey, what's SMAC? I'm sorry.
Oh, SMAC is our Student Multicultural Advisory Council. It is our multicultural club on campus, and we deal with justice, modern issues, either things on campus, things that's going on. This is kind of like the forefront. If you're in school, this would probably be the forefront of our discussion. And we're actually coming out, little plug, but with a little series to kind of follow the events and things that we're dealing with, and some topics that people are confused on, which is Black Lives Matter, the difference between rioting and protesting, and allyship, and so on and so on. But that was something that we talked about. And just even talking to my friends and other people and church folks, and, it was like an array of emotions. But I feel like everyone was kind of, at least who I talked to, who I could relate to, was in the same position of just like, this is such a tragedy. But just like you said, Sonnette, like this is not a new reality, especially not for me. I grew up in a home, obviously I'm Black, I'm also African. Both my parents are from Africa. And they dealt with like apartheid, and, my mom's country was freed in 1984, and she was in high school. So they dealt with a lot of this stuff as well. My dad was in South Africa and he got stopped because he drove on the wrong side of the road, during like that time. And then even coming to America, we lived down south for a very long time and just experiencing stuff like that. And so from a very young age, it was ingrained in me to kind of how to move, like what you were talking about, how you had to talk to your children. Like we knew how to move, you know what I mean? Like we knew how to, that when we, almost like The Hate U Give, if anyone have ever seen that, in the beginning of that movie, Star's father is talking to her and her brothers and telling them how to handle yourself in your approach to the police. Like that was ingrained in me at a young age, something that not my like white brothers and sisters and counterparts never had to have that conversation. If I'm in the passenger seat of my friend's car and we're driving and the police comes by, we don't have the same thoughts. You know what I mean? She's like, "Oh my gosh, the police." I'm like, "Oh my gosh, like slow down, like, like be very cautious," because that's something that I know, like I don't have the luxury of moving funny. I don't have the luxury of trying to, being smart, or being, even if I was in the right, you know what I mean? I don't have the luxury
Yeah.
of questioning. And so it was all that, like a combination of all of that. And then just it coming up to the surface with George Floyd, I had enough, especially being like so young. I was just like, had enough. So yeah.
Hey, Joe. Before I want to give Doug a chance to give how he reacted to it, but just really quick, if you could say, was there any type of like symbolic nature to seeing George Floyd? Because you have how many brothers?
I have three brothers, three older
Three
brothers.
brothers. So was there any type of symbolic nature to man that could be,
And I think that's what hit me so hard, is to click that question. Like as soon as I saw it, I immediately prayed for every single man in my house.
Yes.
From my father to my baby nephew. My nephew's only 1 year old.
Yep.
And it gets me emotional even talking about it, because I immediately saw them, So yeah, it was rough. It was,
Okay. Yeah, no,
I
thank you.
completely agree. It was the same for me in terms of seeing my husband, seeing my cousins, my dad, my sons, that could have been any of them, because what we have learned is that it really is just about skin color. It's not about how educated you are. It's not about your income level. It's really about your skin color, and none of that matters. It's really about skin color. And so that was definitely a part of my prayer that night, and has been a part of my prayer, is to keep my family members safe. I remember checking in with my brother in Albuquerque, New Mexico. We have a family group chat, and just checking in with my cousins on Facebook, just expressing how I felt, through social media. And there was a post that you could repost going around, just kind of naming all of the people in your family, and saying that their lives matter, Black lives matter. And me participating in that, and that resonating with me, and something that I wanted everyone who I'm friends with to see, that how I felt that this could have been one of my family members, one of my loved ones. And it goes very deep that way.
Yeah, and that's something I definitely wanted to make sure we touched on, because I know when that happened. Because for people who don't know, so Black culture is a collectivist culture. So when something happens to one of us, in a sense, in some way, it happens to all of us. And so I remember when that happened, when that video came out, that week for about 3 or 4 days, I got consistent texts. Are you okay? Are you good? And I jogged through the neighborhood. My mom and my friends, hey, be safe. While you're jogging, since after the Ahmaud Arbery thing happened. So I know it's symbolism wrapped in that too when you see that happening. And so for Doug, I want to come to you. How did, when you saw the video, or when you heard about it, if you weren't able to watch it, how did it affect you, and what were your initial thoughts?
Thank you, Herb, and thank you, Sonnette and Joanna. Honestly, I really don't feel qualified to be here or to speak. Because my experience is different, and I'm humbled to be able to share a little bit. I was at my daughter's, helping her with some daddy projects, as I call them. So we were fixing some things. So it was all day on Memorial Day. And so it was probably midday Tuesday until I even heard about it. And I started the video. I haven't gotten all the way through it yet. And I know there was a second video from a different angle. I couldn't get through that either. Joanna, you used the language a moment ago of an array of emotions, and that's exactly how I felt. I mean, I felt deep sadness, and I felt frustration, and I felt anger, and I think I feel all of those still. And honestly, I feel unempowered, and I feel guilt. And I know that I am personally not guilty, but the culture of which I am a part and which I have benefited from every day of my existence is systemically oppressive. And at the very least, and actually in history it goes longer, but in this country it goes back at least 400 years, you know, pre-founding. And so you know, the unempowerment is that excuse me, the power of culture is so strong. None of us can escape it. It's the water we breathe and the air we drink, air we breathe and the water we drink. So we are shaped by it. And yet, as people of faith, we are, as Andy Crouch says, we are called to be culture makers.
Yeah.
And so the lack of empowerment to be able to, how do we actually, and maybe this is a start with what you're doing, Herb, is to help begin to change a culture.
Mm-hmm.
And for an old guy like me, you know, I may not be able to change the people my age, but surely my children and my grandchildren and your children and your siblings, Joanna, you know, maybe there can be a change in culture. And that's my prayer. So, you know, there's great sadness and a sense of loss at what actually to do and to be.
Mm-hmm.
How do you find a way of solidarity when you can't unsituate yourself from who and what you are?
Yeah, no, thank you. And I think you mentioned a strong word that probably led to another word you used, was the idea of guilt. Watching that, and then also after the guilt is being unempowered to do something about it. And how are you working through those feelings now? You know, and I guess before that, I would ask, what would you say leads to the guilt? Is it just the history? Is it, or yeah, you can answer that.
Well, I think what leads to the guilt is the realization that of the systemic nature of these things, and that whiteness really is a thing. And but in most, at least North American, and I think it's broader than that, as Joanna implied, but at least in North America, when you start talking about whiteness and or racism, immediately walls are built up. And so, you know, and you know, when my gut and when I'm particularly frustrated and angry, I want to just push hard and say, no, this is what it is. But on the other hand, I actually want real change. And so, you know, what is the right way to bring real change and get people to understand? And that's where I feel disempowered, is to know strategically, tactically, how to engage an issue that is so critically important in our time and our place. And it's a part of human history. It's a part of the fall. It's a part of a refusal to believe what Scripture teaches about the dignity and worth and equality of every human being created in the image of God, and that the constructs of difference are simply that. They are constructs made by people in power. That's all they are. They're ideologies. And how do we find ways to unsystematize, to disestablish those things which are evil, and establish those things which are holy and good and reflective of God?
Yeah. No,
When you were talking, can I just follow up on that? Doug, and you know, I can see, you know, the guilt, you know, I heard you mention the word, but can actually just kind of see how you were feeling in that regards. And it just, I don't know how many are familiar with Dr. Joy DeGruy's work, but she came up with post-traumatic slave syndrome. And when she speaks, she talks about how we have this long history in America in terms of Black and white issues that neither side has received any healing for. And that's what also makes it difficult, you know, to talk about race-related issues, because we're not used to having these conversations and like these wholesome, you know, conversations. And so I think that hopefully this, and that we continue to just, even though they may be difficult, to have these conversations can help with that healing process that we need. Both sides need it, you know, both groups of people need it, because unless the guilt motivates you to be an agent of change, it's no good, you know. And not saying that that's your case, but what I'm saying is that we need to acknowledge those feelings and get comfortable having those feelings and having these discussions so that healing, you know, can take place and so that we can be agents of change.
Right. Yeah. Thank you. Yeah. You know, I appreciate both of you mentioning your families. I felt the same way. You know, I have a nephew who's an African-American who's been in my brother's house since he was an infant. I mean, he was a week old or something. And when he gets in the car and drives down the road, his experience is different than his brother's. And it's just the reality.
Yeah.
And
No, and I appreciate you saying that, because I think sometimes people, I think what led to the outcry, or what the reason why it was such an outcry after this was because the blatant nature of what, you know, how this looked. Right. And to some people, it was so surprising that this actually happened. And I think for other people, it was so surprising that people were surprised that this actually happened, you know? And I think hearing you say, like, do you have a nephew who you know and you can say, I've seen this happen, matters, because some people don't believe that. And for me, and I talk about my personal reaction to it when I saw the video. So I first saw, when I first saw it, I saw the description of what was happening. And so I just kept scrolling. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna go back to that because I know how I might feel watching it. And so I circled back to it. And when I was watching it, I had a disturbing realization, and that is I have become desensitized to this because of the amount of times that it has happened. And for me, growing up in an area, and I love my hometown, Detroit, Michigan, but it's actually very segregated, you know, and people wouldn't think that. But so I've seen or heard about or know people who have been through these things. And then on top of what you see and what we've seen in the last, I would say 7-8 years, because of the increase in filming of these incidents, I was really desensitized, and that made me angry. And like when I talk to people, I can hear the hurt and the pain and the emotion. And me personally, I couldn't connect because I think my emotions numbed themselves, because like I would just be too angry all the time if I had to respond to every incident. And I think that's a bigger testament to the systemic problem. I would say for me, that was a bigger realization to the testament of what's going on and how important it is to change what's going on, because I'm used to it. You know, it's like, and that shouldn't be the case. And I think, I don't know, I just didn't know what to do. And in the same way you said that you felt disempowered, I would feel the same way. And, you know, I was angry about the fact that I said this to my friends, I said, if any one of us were out with a loved one or a friend, and you saw it was a random person who was kneeling on their neck, you would react and go help, right? You would go try to break that up because you care about them. And then the fact that because of how much power and authority law enforcement has or police has, nobody felt empowered to go do that, or they felt safe enough to go do that. So they literally had to watch somebody die. I just felt helpless in that sense, that I couldn't do anything about that. And then I asked, if that was somebody who I knew, the symbolism piece, what could I have done to stop that, you know? And man, it was just, and I know people have a wide range spectrum of emotions, but like I said, just the realization that I am desensitized to that was, it was angering in that way, you know? And so I had to really work through that. over the last week or so that, man, that's become that much of a realization. And so I guess for me, my follow up, and so I had to personally been working through that. I guess my follow up question to you all, and Sonnette, I'll go to you, is how have you personally, I guess, been dealing with the aftermath of that incident and what's been going on post the incident?
Yeah. And before I answer that, if I can just kind of follow up with what you had said too. Yeah. And Joanna, you had said earlier, like it made you angry looking at the police officer and just how nonchalant he seemed to be. One of the images that sticks out in my mind is how he had his hands in his pocket, and he just really, it was like, it seemed to me like he was making a statement. And I know people in my circle have talked about how it looked like a modern day lynching to us. And that image, kind of stuck with me, and feeling disempowered. Like if I was there, I know I would have wanted to intervene, but feeling like I couldn't, or else I would lose my life as well. And how our ancestors felt watching a lynching. And that's kind of what it reminded me of, and how I felt, and how others in my circle, felt. And I'll just try to share a quick story. My sister and her husband, they live in a predominantly white area in Maryland, and they were out on a walk. And it was the same morning that this happened with George Floyd. They weren't aware of the incident at this time, but they noticed that they were being followed by a police officer who just kept circling around a few times. And the fear that my sister and my husband felt, and their hearts racing, and them just praying that they wouldn't have to engage with this officer. And this is just before knowing about the George Floyd incident that happened that same morning. And just hearing them say how they prayed, silently, that God, please let us just get back home safely. And she ended up needing to see a therapist about the incident and just trying to work through it. And the therapist suggested that she try to do a video, chat on her social media and kind of use her voice on social media. And one of the questions that she posed at the end of her video was, what do we need to do to try to stop these incidents from happening? Do we need to kind of put away our cell phones and our camera and intervene and say, I'm not going to let another person die, and watch it, which means we have to put our lives at risk if we're going to do that. And we're going to try to police the police. But just feeling like if I was in that position, how badly I would want someone to try to stop it. And just feeling disempowered, just feeling like you feel that way. But knowing that it's a risk in terms of you're losing your own life if you do try to do that. But I just thought it was a powerful question that she posed, what do we try to do differently? What role do we try to play so that we don't see these things happening? So to answer, your question, Herb, it's been very, emotional for me. The emotion that I've experienced the most, though, is just deep sadness, for the most part, in terms of, what it means in terms of, having these conversations, these tough conversations with our kids and stuff. And I have to be honest, I was thankful for the COVID-19 situation, and that we were home, all of us were home, and that we can process and cope with it in the safety of our home. I was thankful for that, and especially for my kids, that I felt like I could just protect them during that time, and for them to be able to process and cope with it. In the safety and comfort of their home, during this time. I've always been, not a complainer of the racial injustices, but I've always been, what's the small part that I can do, to try to be a agent of change. I've always been involved in my children's school district in terms of the Inclusion and Equity Committee. I helped found it. So I've been a member since its inception. And, one of the things I just, trying to take a active leadership role in terms of having these conversations within our community here with our families, in the district, and our students who also have their own committee for inclusion and equity, voice that they, wanted to use their First Amendment right, have a peaceful rally demonstration. And so helping them to organize that and make sure that it's safe for them. So that's how I try to channel all of the emotion I feel around this in terms of what can I do. I have been very vocal, through my social media platform, and just trying to just bring awareness and not to let these individuals' names be forgotten, and to just constantly remind people within my circle that, Black Lives Matter. And for the first time, feeling like enough is enough and not caring who I offend or, I have gotten to that point with these past few incidents, and just really trying to give also people resources in terms of how you can do your little part locally, how you can contact your local, politicians, and, people who are in office in terms of trying to change and demand that policies and laws are changed. So those are kind of the things that I've been involved in.
You said such a great thing that I wanted to make sure I didn't leave or forget, because I'm getting up there. But Joe, you were saying the other day, similar to what Sonnette was saying about enough is enough, and now feeling free to speak about how you passionately feel when it comes to Black lives and not actually caring about people's response to that. And so maybe you can touch on that some too, and maybe work in there how you've been dealing with it.
You said Joe or Doug?
Joe.
Okay. It's funny, before you actually specifically said that, I was actually gonna piggyback on her saying that, Sonnette, because I thought that I'm in the same boat. Like, I'm not really, not really in the manner of really tending to people's feelings anymore. I feel like for a lot of times I've done that. I've grown up in a predominantly white school, and there's been things that have been said and, things that have really bothered me up to this day when I think about, and I look back and I'm be like, man, why didn't I say anything? I was so programmed to be like, don't be that angry Black girl, don't be that, you know what I mean? And not to get in my head. And I feel like now I'm I don't care. I feel like if you don't stand up or speak up for what you feel is right, or not even that, but if you do say something, say to a friend or someone and they feel uncomfortable or they feel offended by that, then you know what I mean? At least that, you're being honest with yourself, that they're not, receptive to change, or receptive to hearing our everyday struggles, you know what I mean? So, because this is an everyday thing I think about, because I can't stop thinking about it, you know what I mean? This is something that when I get older and, down the line, have a family and have kids, I'm going to have Black children. They're going to have this conversation, you know what I mean? Right. How I had that conversation. And so it's something that I it's almost like a weight off my shoulder. I feel free enough to be like, hey, I'm just going to say it how it is, because I feel like it's necessary and people need to hear it.
Yeah. No, thank you. And I think it's so important that people actually hear that, and that I come to you. And then what we'll do is this will be our last question, because I want people to really focus on what we say here and hear these feelings. And if you all are willing, I would love to do a part 2 of this sometime in the upcoming weeks, because I think it's that important. But I think people need to hear what you two both said, is that at this point there's a final a freedom and a feeling that I am just going to be authentically Black. And and who I am. And I think that means that at some point in time where our lives, and I can also agree, that we haven't felt comfortable being authentically Black and not being judged for it. And the way I look at it is when you're born in America or anywhere, but when you're Black in America specifically, you think about how other races affect you, but then you also think about how you affect other races, right? So I'll give an example. I'm walking down the street and I see a white lady, and this happens often. I'll think okay, this is a white woman. So, how is she thinking about me? And then I also think, what could she do to, like, what could she say or do? We all probably seen the Karen, quote unquote, like, what could she say or do that can get me in trouble? And then also, what is she thinking about me as I'm walking down the street, right? So let me cross to the other side of the road because I don't want her to see my Blackness and be threatened by that. Yeah. And she may not be thinking that at all, but I have to think that as a Black male society. And so the fact that you live in this double consciousness all the time, it's exhausting, And I think if you're white, you don't necessarily have to do that. You can think about how other races affect you, but because you're the dominant culture, right, you don't have to think about how you affect other races unless you intentionally do so, right? Unless
and recognize your privilege.
So. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
So I just wanted to bring that up because that was so powerful what you two said. And go ahead, Joe.
Just to say a quick story, like I think other people are kind of slowly starting to understand that too, and like realize that me and my brother were in the store today, and behind us was a white family, and in front of us was a white family, and they were there for a while. We were in the checkout line, and we were just talking, whatever. And I guess they had some problems, and like it was taking longer for them to check out, and so they had to step to the side. And the guy said, "I'm sorry about that." I was like, "No, it's okay." And he was like, because they're not trying to step on your toes or make you feel comfortable. It's this whole thing. I'm like, "No, honestly, it's fine." And so me and my brothers left, and I'm like, "What do you think that was about?" It's like because it's like we were like, it's totally cool, it happens. But I was like, I think honestly, it could have been what's going on the road, and they want to seem like they're like I don't know. I know it's like kind of out there. Like that was the first thing I thought, that maybe they're being more cognizant or trying to be respectful. So yeah.
And Doug, you can go ahead. Maybe you talk about and you can be our last question here. And then if Joe and Sonnette want to close out with anything after this, feel free. And then we'll be done. But Doug, how are you personally dealing with this? And do you want to maybe respond to anything that was said?
Well, first of all, I would just like to say thank you. I just hearing each of you talk gives me great encouragement. I might feel a little bit empowered by your chutzpah to say I'm not going to take this anymore. So thank you. It's really encouraging to me. It's life-giving to hear your energy and willingness to be the beautiful people that you are and not try to fit into some other thing. And that's so wonderful. So I'm helped by that. What I'm trying to do is, honestly, I'm trying to listen. I mean, I don't think it's time for another aging white man to pontificate about something. I just don't. And I think the best thing I can do is listen and to share things that seem to resonate with truth. And so I have been doing a little more active on social media this week and last week since this happened than I normally am. But I'm trying, I'm not trying to say, I'm not trying to create the content as much as I'm trying to help people see the content that is good. Almost a curator in some sense. And as I said, I don't know that I'm qualified, but I know that there are people who are. And it's time for people like me to do more listening than fixing, and to be a part of those who can see the way more clearly because their experience is different.
Yeah.
And so that's kind of the posture I'm in right now. I mean, I would like to be more of an activist, and I want to be, but I don't want to presume I know the answers.
Mm-hmm.
I think there's an arrogance there that says, okay, we can just fix this up, when it's bigger than a quick fix.
Yeah.
And so I want to have a modest posture about how to step forward. So I'm reading. I'm trying to read more and educate myself more fully, so that I can move forward more faithfully. So I want to thank you all for the chance to be a part of this conversation.
Yeah. Well, yeah, we thank you and appreciate the culture of humility in that. Yeah, and I like the word you said, being willing to listen. I think when people take the time to listen, they understand more, about other people. So thank you. And Joe or Sonnette, any final comments that you want to have or share?
Yeah. So oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
Okay. I guess just kind of piggybacking on what Doug said. I have a lot of friends, and like I said, I grew up in a predominantly white area, so I have a lot of, close white friends. And they're in the same boat. I think the common phrase that they kind of go around is white guilt, and we're kind of talking about it too in our SMAC group in our leadership meeting, just about how the feeling of white guilt and feeling man, maybe in the past I've seen it before, but I've never stepped up, or I should have been more vocal, or I should have known the signs before. But I feel the biggest thing and an important thing is to first just recognize it. I think we all have had moments, like I said before, in the past, I've had moments where I'm man, how come I just never said something that made me feel uncomfortable? We all have moments where we feel we should have stepped up and said something. But now that we can recognize it, we can kind of move forward and be okay, from this point on, I'm going to point out injustice. I'm going to point out some of the things that I see and notice that are wrong vocally. I think we all can agree that everyone's angry, especially Doug, you're also mentioning earlier about the system and how, people are done and tired of the systemic racism that has been ingrained in the foundation of our country. And we're at the point where we're okay, we're had enough, and we're gonna, shout until someone hears us. So I think allyship is a big thing as well. And yeah, it's great that you kind of recognize it now that we can see hey, I'm going to use my voice now. And yeah, it's awesome.
Clapping it up. So listen, come on, use your voice. I like it. And I'm shameless plug for the SMAC Student Multicultural Varsity Council. Joe is the VP. Interview, kill it. They got events. You can go follow them. Is it SMAC RWC?
Yeah, on Instagram.
Okay, all right, cool. I just wanted to go ahead and give you a shameless plug. All right, Sonnette, anything you want to leave us with?
I just wanted to say to Doug, thank you for also being an example of how you don't, like you said, you don't want it to be this quick fix. And I think a part of that is just being able to sit with the emotions and not trying to fix things so quickly so that you feel better, but just being willing to sit with those emotions. And so I just wanted to say thank you for you being an example of that as well. And I also just wanted to say, I agree with Joe, and I have a lot of, white friends as well. And for the first time, I feel that white America is actually able to say that this is a part of racism, and recognizing and acknowledging that. And that has been huge, for me and for a lot of other Black people that I know, and feeling they're also getting, or at least trying to understand, the Black Lives Matter movement, and being honest and saying, I didn't really get it initially, and I didn't get why it was wrong to say that all lives matter. But understanding and recognizing now the problem and the awareness that we're trying to bring to that problem concerning Black lives. And so I've been, encouraged by that. And I feel, this incident with George Floyd, it just feels different than past incidents in terms of heading in the right direction, having the right conversations now, those honest, hard conversations, and heading in the right direction in terms of change. For the first time, I feel like we may see justice in the case of George Floyd, and I've never felt that way with past incidents. Never was shocked, that the officers weren't found guilty and that sort of thing. And for the first time, I feel hopeful. And I just want to say that I'm really encouraged by what I see in terms of white America standing with us and standing up, you know, to racism. So I hope that the conversations continue, and, you know, I hope to see that we continue to head, you know, in the right direction regarding this.
Yeah. Well, perfect. Thank you. I couldn't say anything that's gonna be better than what you all said right there. So I'm gonna leave it right there and just say, for everybody who's eventually going to watch this, thank you for listening to this. And the hope is that you will send follow-up questions to myself. You can send the questions to the email is diversity_equity@roberts.edu, and then we'll get back to you with that. And Doug, you gonna say something? No, okay, all right. And so yeah, appreciate that. And I think everybody here, I got agreements to a part 2.
Yes.
So I'm gonna go ahead and sign you all up for that at some point. So thank you all, and we'll be back doing that again. I appreciate you.
Good.
Thank you, Herb. Thank you for having
Thank you
these
for doing it.
and organizing it and setting it up. Thank you.
Yes.
Yep, absolutely.
Thank
All
you.
right. And so,
Good night, everybody. Thank you.
Bye, everyone.
all right.
Thank you.